continue to tell my life story because I'm not sure if everyone has heard it. I have been a pediatrician in our district actually since 1999, so that makes it almost 2 decades. I have been in Florida since 1997. I trained in New York, Long Island Jewish Medical Center. I'm going backwards a little bit, and I came here to America in 1993. I immigrated on a J-1 visa. And further back, the reason that I even came to America is because I wanted to have a better life for myself, my family, and possibly improve the lives of everyone around me. So I've always been taking care of children. I just don't know any other thing that I would do in my life, aside probably from public speaking now. But she very well know I was Jenny from the hood before I became Dr. Z. My parents were born in Fishing Islands and did not have much in life. And so I was raised in the tradition of ora et labora, which is Latin for prayer and work. And that's essentially my entire life. My entire life has been prayer and work. And so I say prayer because it doesn't mean whichever prayer you believe in, whichever faith you have. The important thing is it guides you to do the right thing. As you very well know, I've been married for almost 24 years now to my husband, Jay, who happens to be a Jewish guy from the Bronx. So I could have been Jenny from the block. So anyway, we do have 3 children and 2 boys and a girl, and they are cashews, Catholic Jews. We raise our kids in a the Judeo-Christian tradition. We had decided early on nobody converted to each other's faith. In fact, I'm so good at faith that my husband, who was only Jewish twice a year, became he rediscovered Judaism, and we both discovered each other's faiths, and it turned out there was not much difference. And basically, the tenet that we believe in is that we do as much as we can for the least of our brothers and sisters, and that's what has guided me in my life. So one of the things that is interesting about me is that when I started in Florida, I wanted, after being employed by North Palooza Medical Center for 2 years, I decided, and previous to that, having worked in a health center, I really had a dream to have a little mom and pop clinic where I could be pretty much independent. I did not want to be owned by any corporation where they can dictate to me what I'm supposed to be doing. So I, unfortunately, when you're a woman, an immigrant, and someone who really didn't have much clout at that point, nobody's really willing to lend you any money. And so I'm very stubborn and don't take no for an answer. So I actually borrowed from my life insurance policy. And in fact, New York Life, I've talked to them, and they are interested in my story probably because of the fact that I had a whole life policy that I was able to borrow from. And so I started Kids Care Pediatrics September 4, 2001. And so that was on a loan, and thankfully, through all these years, the community has embraced me, and that's really my life story of service to the community. I had a few opportunities to leave and maybe go back to the big city, but the place has grown on me, and my kids have gone to the schools here, and we have built a life for ourselves. It is quite difficult when you're, the way you think is quite different from the way others think. It's also quite difficult when your family is of mixed heritage, none of which is Baptist. It's difficult when, in fact, one of the first shocking things I encountered when we were looking for a house is they told me, don't go to certain places. If they find out you're an immigrant or your husband's a Jew, they will not welcome you. And I'm not going to name those places, but we were told to stay away from certain places. And that was my first real exposure to, this is America, they still have this, and so on and so forth. So my life has been really to serve the underserved. As I said, we're comfortable now, thankfully, but I'm not comfortable being the only one comfortable. That's what I always say. I feel that God has called me for a mission, and As I said, I've dedicated already close to 2 decades to serving the children, and they have told me every day for this past few years that there are certain problems in the community, and they're looking for a different voice. The ones that we've had for the past 25 years that I've been in America from this district have always been the same mold. So it's almost like the same Good Old Boys Network. When I was in Crestfield, the same thing. I was only one of 3 female physicians there. I always happened to be in this only female thing. When I was in Central Florida, I was the only female physician out of a dozen male physicians, and that's when I first experienced the inequality of pay when we were female. And we were all immigrants, except for one who was American, and I gave him that. I mean, he's from this country, and he's been serving their community. He should get paid much higher, but when you're a woman and you're paid 60 cents to $1 compared to the males, that was my first exposure to inequality of pay. So what I bring to this race, I believe, is the change that we probably have been looking for. I'm not here to bash the other side. I'm not here to say they're right. I mean, I'm right and they're wrong. I'm just here to say, maybe let's try a different technique. Maybe let's try a different method. As we always say, if you're banging your head against the wall all these years, maybe go look into the window that might be open. And I found a little sliver of light. And I felt, my life changed. Obviously, all of us were shell-shocked in 2016, and we all wanted to feel, or we probably woke up and said, oh my gosh, how did that happen, and what can I do about it? Some just yelled at the TV, some threw the remotes at the TV, but a few of us, mostly women, said, wait a minute, you don't mix coloreds and whites in the laundry, let me do it myself. And that's essentially what I found myself doing when our incumbent had his first town hall. I've never been to a town hall before. I don't know about you guys. I've never been politically active. I do pay attention. But his first town hall was only 6 miles from the clinic. And it was very convenient after office hours. And I said, you know what? I've never been to one. Let me just see. And at that point, the biggest project, or the biggest cause that they were pushing, was the repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act. And if you're coming from my field, which is the medical field, you know how much that hurts. That is the only issue at this point that I know that no one can say is bipartisan, that it only affects certain groups, whether it's racial, socioeconomic. This is not a red or blue issue. This is not a right or left issue. It's a top and bottom issue. There's no demographics with cancer. There is no zip codes or health insurance plan when it comes to congenital heart disease. This is one field that I know what I'm talking about. So I went to the town hall and I pleaded with our incumbent. And if you don't believe me, there is a video. And what I wanted to convey, and the emotions came out and the passion, and you know how passionate I can get about certain topics, is that probably, sir, you haven't heard a doctor actually plead for their patients. Not all of us are up there in the mountains not caring. We do care. We do care, but we have constraints. Constraints that our hands are held by insurance companies, prior authorizations, time constraints, the financial aspect. Who better to bring that to the forefront than somebody who's both a provider and a consumer of healthcare? My family has suffered from lack of insurance because of pre-existing conditions. I can tell you right now, that is an issue that most Americans are concerned about. Across the board, I don't think anyone will argue. Because if you're not sick right now, you were sick yesterday, or you will be sick tomorrow. It doesn't matter who you are. That does not ask for your party affiliation. So I entered, unfortunately fortunately my life changed. I found my voice, and apparently a lot of people reached out to me after that and found their voice and said, you know what, they haven't heard that kind of voice here. Maybe it's time to think about that. And so that's what I bring to this race. My life experiences as an immigrant, as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, as a physician. And I hope that you continue to learn about my life story and possibly find a little bit something in there that has affected your life, probably similarly. Because I am the quintessential American dream. Rising from all obstacles, trying to do what's best, not only for yourself, but for your family and the ones around you. And hopefully we can inspire. If I can kick that door wide open, there might be others pushing that door together with me. So I am honored that I am the first female candidate of any major political party from this district to ever get to the general election. I think no matter which way you lean, no matter who you supported, it is the first for our district, and I think we should be proud that we've broken that barrier. And just because I broke that barrier doesn't mean it will be the last time we break that barrier. We will break every barrier that we can. I can just be a vessel for it. I can just start it. I can just creak that door open, and maybe we can push all together, as you say, stronger together, we can push that door wide open for other qualified candidates, regardless of gender or whatever your orientation is or wherever affiliation you have. We just want decency back. A vote for me, and it's up and down. The Democratic ticket is a vote for decency and back to humanity as far as I'm concerned. So I hope you think about that, and I'm open to any questions. Yes, Samantha?
All right, so my question is, this was a question that was asked to Beto O'Rourke, who's
I
running
love
for
that guy.
who's running for senator. So the question is, he was asked at a town meeting he was doing.
Are you okay? I feel uncomfortable being behind it.
At some of the historically black colleges, and he was asked the question, and this kind of ties into some of the things that Alex was asked about the school to prison pipeline and police brutality. And I believe that the most marginalized people in this country are black women, specifically black women who are part of the LGBT community. So the question that he was asked was, what will you do for black women?
There's a couple of ways to answer that question. First of all, I wish I could vote for Beto. I don't know about you, but I've been following him. He gives me the vibe of Robert F. Kennedy.
He's better.
I wasn't here then, I'm just going by he just gives me that vibe. And let me tell you, the reason I said there's two ways to answer that. Number one, as a woman of science, let me tell you some statistics that are staggering. You may not be aware that maternal mortality has been rising in America. In a first world nation like the United States of America, once again I repeat, maternal mortality has been rising, and the fastest rise in the African American community. I tried to research exactly why that affects you disproportionately. And one of the main reasons is lack of access to healthcare. Lack of access to healthcare. That's atrocious. We live in a first world country when all other first world countries around the world or developing nations are able to provide adequate healthcare. Not just reproductive, but healthcare to all of its citizens. So, if you're a black woman, you have a 40% chance of possibly having a death or a maternal complication because of your because of your color. If you don't believe that, look at Serena Williams. I can't think of any other black woman who's more fit than Serena Williams. She had a baby after the age of 30, which is a risk factor. She is extremely fit, and I'm sure she's not on a whole slew of medications. She's been tested multiple times. I'm sure she's just on the right, whatever she's on. But what was the determining factor? She developed an embolism post-delivery and almost killed her. That is one of the risk factors. Pregnancy-related hypertension. You know what else is common? Not only in women. In our field, it is extremely difficult to control high blood pressure in black men. They don't respond to the same medication we give to the white folks. They're still trying to research and this and that, but there are higher deaths from complications from high blood pressure because they do not respond the same way. There are a lot of higher ectopic pregnancies. All of this I can mention in all the statistics, but that's why when I listened to Beto, I'm glad he mentioned that. Because that is one thing I want to make sure we know, because access to healthcare is my main focus, because as I said, it does not recognize differences in us. And at the same time, it will uplift the life of the Black population. Because if we actually have more studies that can be funded to improve the lives and the rates of maternal mortality, not only in the African American community, but in all women in general, wouldn't that be mission accomplished for us? Number 2, that school to prison pipeline. As I mentioned to you, my son was stopped. It scared him to death. It scared me to death. But you know what? I have patients in the African American community who tell me what happened to them. There's a higher chance for them to be disciplined in school, and I have to deal with that because I have to write all these letters and all this excuse stuff, and I have to make sure, even if sometimes I feel like, they have to be on their medication, they have to be, while they're in my clinic, they feel that they're safe and they can tell me all the experiences they have. Yes, they are disproportionately judged upon the basis of their color, and yes, I see a lot of kids who have behavioral problems. Don't get me wrong, I do see them. But the opportunities presented, they seem to be at a disadvantage because of the community they live in and the color of their skin. One of the things that I want to make sure, and I hope that we can do that in our school board, and I'm not quite adept as who's in there right now, who's running, is we need to have representation in the school board that matches the kids that they actually see. What distresses me is that when I find out that schools are getting closed, not in the white communities, but mostly in the low socioeconomic communities that we have, and most of them are in the African American communities. Instead of helping those who need the help, we're kicking them while they're down. And part of that is because we all have our own life experiences. And if you're not in that particular category, it is hard to understand what that person is going through. And we need representation. We've had the same frat boys that go to our legislation or our councils and this and that, and no offense meant. but if you have, is Alex here?
Yeah, he's still there.
And no offense to you, Grover. By the way, I met Grover. I wanted to buy a building for my clinic, if you remember, Grover. And I said, Grover, as much as I want this building and I really, really need it, I can't afford it. And no bank is going to lend me the money for this clinic. So I settled on a smaller one, and thank God for 17 years, Skid Scared did very, very well with no advertisement. It's called word of mouth. But my point, Samantha, is that we know that the African American community is disproportionately judged. And you know why? Because it's systemic. On my 54th birthday, instead of having a celebration, I went to Montgomery, Alabama. I wanted to see for myself what they had in that museum. I heard that it was a very, it's an experience. If you haven't been there, please do so if you can. Has anyone been there?
No.
Okay. What they have there, when you enter, it's a very respectful place, but there's a section there where they have the signs that were, the real signs that they took from buildings. Mm-hmm. One of the signs that really got to me was this huge sign. It says the N-word, Jews, dogs. You're not welcome here. Well, had I lived during that time, my husband probably would have been executed as well. But what was telling was that each and every step of the way, it was legal. It was in the books. And did you know that in Alabama, it's still in their books about segregation? It's still in the books. So my point, Samantha, and everyone here, I can assure you that though I may not share all of your experiences, I have listened to my patients and their experiences and the community. And I know that we have a long way to go. And if you can talk to me and tell me exactly where our legislators have failed you and what we can bring over to DC, I think that's the start of where we can be. Yes, sir.
I've two things I want to say. One thing is just a statement. Both Alex Andretti and my dad actually had a very similar, I guess.
I don't know who your dad is. Is he running for office too?
No. He's a white male, so that's a privilege thing, I guess. White straight Christian male. That's a real big privilege. So we're both pulled over by police and had their cars searched. So to say that that only happens to minorities is kind of a
I don't.
Or like that's the only minority issue. That's like a big thing that's necessarily only affecting.
What's your name, sir?
Dave.
Dave. Okay. I think Dave. In every conversation, with all due respect, I think this is where we tend to have our disconnect. When it's all or nothing, or me and the world. I think we need to hear that. What we're saying is that there is a disproportionate number that is reported out there, or there is a feeling that certain minority groups are disproportionately pulled over. Chris Rock has been pulled over about 7 times, is what he said. Whereas I don't think Bradley Cooper would be. Now, I would love to pull him over. Sorry, Jay, but he is identity. But what I'm saying is, I'm not trying to say that no whites. See, this is where we digress. We don't say that no whites ever get pulled over, or only blacks get pulled over. I think the feeling is, in the black community, they're a little bit more scared, and there's a historical reason for that. There's a historical reason. If you ever go, please go to the Legacy Museum, because you can see that the narrative that has been thrown out there from the very beginning is that blacks are more inferior, therefore it's okay to treat them like that. That's through this years of slavery. And unfortunately, in our present environment, that narrative is continually being said. You have senators and congressmen and legislators that say that the IQ of African Americans are lower than the IQ of white people, therefore that affirmative action must be removed because it's just giving them an unfair advantage. Now you can fact check me on this, but this has been said many times over. So what we're saying is there's no systemic, and I have nothing against whites. I married a white guy. There is a systemic belief that one race far supersedes another, or is better than the other, and there is a historical background for that. First of all, African Americans did not come here voluntarily. They did not come here voluntarily, and if you see those chains and shackles and whatever, it will really hit you that if they had a choice then, they probably would have wanted to stay where they were. Right. We brought them here forcefully, and we made them perform forced labor for America.
Well, we didn't do that. My ancestors didn't own slaves. Your ancestors were, I'm assuming.
Well, I'm from the Philippines.
So obviously not.
We were all supporting
no one who is alive today.
That's not actually true, because I've actually done a DNA test. I've also done my family tree, and you will link me up. I do not, like, my family history is, my parents, my grandparents, my great-great-grandparents. It starts with my 3-time great-grandparents. That's where the European ancestry starts. I'm very fair-skinned, I realize that, but that is where the European ancestry starts. And I have had the toughest time when I have talked to these white individuals online, and people have seen me talk about some of these horrible things that they've said to me, where, I tell them, I say, this is how we're related. I actually found out that a friend that lives in Pace is actually my cousin because of the DNA test, and we were able to figure out how we're related. So that was actually kind of cool, I guess, even though I guess we know it's a horrible way we're related. But, when you're talking to these people and you tell them, you say, your ancestor owned me owned my family, and they went absolutely, most of them, I mean, I had one or two people that were willing to have a conversation, and actually on my mom's paternal side, I had a lady that was very open and gave me a lot of information. But a lot of people are very much in denial because the slavery was not that long ago. It was about 150 years ago.
And
I mean,
the Civil Rights Act was only in the 60s.
right, and so it really wasn't that long ago because
So I think Dave was trying to.
Well, yes, I'm not saying no one's here's ancestors from slaves, but no one who is alive today owned slaves. That's what I'm trying to say. So whenever you say America, we own slaves, no one in America who's presently living owns slaves. You can't blame people.
How's that relevant?
Actually, Dave, if I may say so, they're not called slaves anymore. But the economic warfare on the poor is the modern slavery.
Yes.
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 The kids in cages are the modern slaves. The kids who are brown, who are brought in here by their parents, the DACA recipients are like the slaves who have nowhere to go.
thank you.
The prison system is actually a continuation, and if you, that's why I said I implore you, please visit the Legacy Museum. You will see the connection between the slavery and the present prison system. And I know, we're running out of time. There's so much we can talk about. And I'm glad that I'm able to bring this out here.
Let's finish up his question. What, okay, so just a statement that we don't presently own slaves.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
you can make the argument that the prison
School to prison.
yeah, whatever, school to prison pipeline is like real. That's not my argument, but I'm saying it's like plantation slavery as in that regard as Southern slavery.
It just changes over time. But the thing is, we're still there's still some segments of society that are shackled and can't move forward because of institutionalized and legalized forms of slavery that may not be the cotton plantations, but the rate of it, if you look at rates of incarceration, let me just, if you don't mind, just for example, there is affluenza. If you're super rich, you're white and you kill people, you can get away with it because you got affluenza. What do you call a poor black guy who's caught with 1 gram of marijuana? A thug. A thug. So there's a difference in labeling. And I'm not saying that all white people are bad. I'm just saying that there are still institutions up to this day and age that is stacked against certain people. It's just stacked against you. When you still have segregation in other parts of the country, that's really something we should be ashamed
I
of.
think Pensacola is very segregated. I don't know much about Milton and Pace, but I think, I've lived in Pensacola for 39 years, I think.
Milton's a little bit more rural. So in certain areas, I was still
Milton's
not
worse.
Oh yeah.
I can just say that just because you can say, oh, nobody's alive that owns slaves, so we must be okay. That's not true. There's a chapter of the KKK that still actively meets in Munson, which is 30 minutes from my house. Jay, Florida, which is a 10-minute drive from where I live, still actively tries to keep minorities out of their community. So that is
That's one of the
bullshit.
places they told me not to go to.
Figured it was.
But I can
That's
go
not
on the
slavery.
dark web. I can go on the dark web and order myself a slave.
Yes.
I can
legal.
buy.
Sure can.
It's not legal, but I can buy one.
Well, legally,
And what
slavery
about
is
human
legal.
trafficking that
Human
trafficking
that
also.
targets women of color and women in
That's
general?
The point you're missing is that slavery has turned into something else now.
Exactly.
It doesn't look like the slavery you're
Legal
picturing. And let me
slavery.
finish. It doesn't look like the slavery you are picturing in your head. So while you're sitting there talking about white male privilege, maybe read a little bit more. Check out the book Just Mercy. Really educate yourself about the prison pipeline here. It's still slavery, just in a different form.
Yes, sir.
Well, I just want to say this. I respect your opinion, but I work with a group out of Jacksonville. I would like for you to go with them. All the trips are paid for, but we took them to D.C. and they were harassed. All of their teachers are white, and once they came in and said something, then it piped down. And then also the Department of Justice, which we brought a simulator here to show police officers how their response to an African American over a Caucasian, it's just astonishing. Then if you go to YouTube, which I'm quite familiar, if you just look at downtown Minnesota, how many incidents where a Caucasian person was on Flocka, and they were totally out of control, and they wasn't even tased. Whereas then a black guy had something that looked like a gun, and he was shot dead. So that is it. But I think that with the Congress woman here, what could really help the black community is economic development again in his community. And at one time in Pensacola, we owned our own cleaners, our own hotels, our own restaurants, and all that. And they employed. The biggest problem with the African American community right now is that it doesn't have the advantage as an immigrant would have, because as an immigrant would come over here, they can get grants and loans that's no interest back. You don't have that extension for the African American community in no city, and so it's
That wasn't granted to me,
well.
I can tell you that.
Well, there are programs out here that will grant that, and I think that a lot of people,
What would that be?
a lot of African Americans are tired of being looked down as you're gonna always need a handout. All we need is a step, and we can overcome it. And so that's why I think it's important for us to have someone that represents us in Congress that will look at this area and see that this area does need a strong military here, because it does need a strong longshoreman here, because if you give them a chance, just like I don't know why the city of Pensacola won't hire a person who got a marijuana charge to drive a garbage truck. So when you can't give those economic advantages, then that's it. Because I think that the plight, my daughter knows no poverty. My daughter she has a maid and a nanny. And it's not that we're rich, it's just that we make choices. But for her to study more, because we don't ever want her to look to anyone for the step. We want to give her that step. So I understand what you're saying, man, but you have to realize that there's 3 black families in my neighborhood, okay? And out of the 3 black families on there, I'm the only one that get asked, how did you get your riding lawnmower? And I think that's a very ignorant question.
I would ask anyone, and
I think we need to move on, so great discussion, and I appreciate your questions.
It's been a very fiery
Thought
discussion today.
provoking. Everyone their own meeting, so we can.
Is Alice Andrade still here? We didn't scare you.
He's hiding from me.
Some communism back here. I don't know.
No, but that's why I said thank you very much for giving us an opportunity, because one of the things that I had actually encountered, and this is not just the black experience, is just being also my gender. Being a woman candidate, what I have experienced is undue bullying. You see, there's still this thing out there, and I'm not going to use my gender as an excuse, but it is across the board also, that if you're a man running for office, or if you're a man trying to establish a business, if you're a man going out there, look at our present president. No matter what he says, oh, he's strong. Oh, he's strong, even if he's cursing, he's using inappropriate language, he's strong, look at him. He's bullying everybody, he's strong. But what is a woman called?
Like Maxine Waters.
Exactly.
Yes.
There are certain choice words used for a woman. So you are judged. You are judged double, like Maxine, because not only is she a woman, she's also a woman of color. How dare she open her mouth that way? But I have felt it. I have felt it, and I know that I have a long uphill climb. But that's why I need each and every one of you to consider what our platform, to consider and really see the difference. Do you really think our incumbent is going to listen to what you have to say? He is one of those privileged ones, and it's okay to be privileged, because I have friends who are privileged and who understand and who are willing to help. But for the most part, from what I have seen, is the people we have sent over to DC have been the privileged males who did not understand.